Don't even think about it.
According to the film's official novelization, this character is Liz Allen, a character from the comics whom we would later see in Spider-Man: Homecoming, renamed Liz Toombs, the daughter of Adrian Toombs, aka the Vulture. On this screen, we can see a list of the abilities Peter will gain after the spider bite.
We solved the Horizon Glide!
This character is a classic Spider-Man villain known as Professor Mendelstrom, who is also an enemy of Norman Osborn. In this shot from the movie, we can see that one of the lab's domes is labeled with the number 23. This is a reference to the Amazing Spider-Man number 23, a classic Spider-Man comic in which he fights the Green Goblin, and where Norman Osborn appears for the first time, though it is not yet revealed that he and the Goblin are the same character. In Peter's room, we can repeatedly spot posters from the Magic: The Gathering trading card game. On the shelf, we can see several track and field trophies, most likely belonging to Uncle Ben. Uncle Ben's car is actually director Sam Raimi's personal car, and it appears in every one of his films. The room where Norman wakes up after becoming the Green Goblin for the first time is the only one in the entire mansion with green walls, likely a visual nod to his alter ego. Norman losing his memory of what he did as the Green Goblin is a reference to the comics, where this happened repeatedly after he discovered Spider-Man's identity. Every time the Goblin returned, the story would end with Norman suffering memory loss, until his death in issue number 122. Tobey Maguire actually performed this scene without CGI or practical effects. The only assistance he had was a light adhesive on the tray surface. It took him 156 attempts to get it right. When Peter is designing his suit, we can notice a couple of details. First, he discards the idea of using a utility belt. This is a reference to the comics, where Spider-Man does use a belt to store extra web cartridges, spider tracers, and even his spider signal. In one of the designs, we can see a logo on his head that resembles the marking found on the backs of Black Widow spiders, and another variant that is reminiscent of the superhero Stingray. When Norman sits down to read the note that foretells his downfall at Oscorp, if we pause the scene we can clearly make out the text and uncover several interesting details related to Osborn. To begin with, the article mentions that Oscorp was founded in 1966, the same year issues number 39 and number 40 of The Amazing Spider-Man were released, which the movie draws heavily from. Among other things, those issues include the moment when the Goblin discovers that Peter is Spider-Man and the reveal that the Goblin is actually Norman Osborn. Regarding the company, the note states that before it was called Oscorp Industries, it operated under the name Osborn Manufacturing. It also explains that Norman had to mortgage his home and borrow money from everyone he knew in order to avoid bankruptcy. In the mid-1970s, the company shifted its focus from industrial equipment to defense contracts, despite several close friends questioning Norman's decision. In 1983, the company Valid Defense System attempted a hostile takeover of Oscorp, but Norman managed to save the company after spending 2 full days calling and persuading shareholders to change the direction of their vote. In the present day within the film, the rival company has changed its name to Kirk and now specializes in producing computer cards, while Oscorp remains among the 2 or 3 largest private defense contractors in the country. At just 18 years old, Norman was one of the youngest graduates in MIT's history and began showing interest in miniaturized computing. Throughout his career, he published more than 250 papers and became a major pioneer in nanotechnology and its applications. However, the article also mentions that he is far from well-liked in the workplace. He is described as arrogant, authoritarian, and aggressive, and some claim that his rise to the top was made possible in part by sacrificing people who had once been loyal to him. The article mentions that Osborn had always maintained a good relationship with the government, until the recent change in administration, likely referring to the Bush presidency. The new Secretary of Defense despises Norman, putting the contracts between Oscorp and the government under serious strain. Oscorp's new rival in the defense contracting race is Quest Aerospace, which is developing an armor and transport system known as the Badger. Later in the film, we see the Green Goblin attack the Badger's test run, taking out the Secretary of Defense in the process. However, Quest Aerospace's involvement in the competition complicates things for Oscorp's own project, the Super Soldier program. If the name sounds familiar, it's no coincidence. Super Soldier is the same term used during World War II for the program that created the serum that transformed Steve Rogers into Captain America. However, in this scene there's no direct mention of the hero or the war. The project is simply referenced as another scientific development within Oscorp's corporate world. According to the report, the decision to fire Norman comes from the fact that he is directly tied to the Super Soldier program, which has a high chance of being shut down. If that happens, the only option the company has to reassure investors is to reinvent itself and prove that it will no longer be guided by Osborn's individual vision. However, the Super Soldier program has been highly praised by the scientific community, introducing major innovations in the fields of chemistry and nanotechnology. The goal of the program isn't to create weapons, but to turn soldiers into weapons by enhancing their strength, endurance, reflexes, and mental acuity, all abilities Norman will gain when he becomes the Green Goblin. In any case, it's not the only defense project Oscorp is working on, and there's even an explanation for why a military suit like the Green Goblin's includes a mask with a deliberately monstrous appearance. According to the article, they are developing a piece of hardware designed to instill fear in the heart of the enemy. The goal of the program isn't to create weapons, but to turn soldiers into weapons by enhancing their strength, endurance, reflexes, and mental acuity, all abilities Norman will gain when he becomes the Green Goblin. Despite all of this, there is a sidebar noting that the company's stock is already falling, which likely accelerated the decision to fire Norman. The actor who plays Bonesaw McGraw is Randy Savage, also known as Macho Man, a real former WWE wrestler who passed away in 2011.
What's your name, kid?
This character is played by Bruce Campbell, the star of the Evil Dead saga directed by Sam Raimi, who is also the director of Spider-Man.
Say chess! Chess!
This scene takes place immediately after the Green Goblin's first attack and right before Peter and Norman meet, so it's no coincidence that the color green is so deliberately prominent in the visual design. Aunt May has a certain fondness for plants. Here we can see she's wearing a plant-patterned outfit. Here's another one. The house is wallpapered with plant-themed designs, and she also keeps several plants in the living room and sitting area. In this shot, we can briefly see the Twin Towers reflected in Spider-Man's eyes. This serves as a tribute, since by the time the movie was released, the towers had already been destroyed. Throughout the film, the wardrobe makes extensive use of the colors associated with each character. Here, for example, we can see MJ wearing Spider-Man's colors. This photograph of Spider-Man comes from a behind-the-scenes moment of the film, where you can see that, at the time, the production was considering giving Spider-Man black lenses instead of white ones. This was later confirmed by artists who worked on the movie. We can also notice several complaints about bug infestations throughout the city. This will become important later on when a specific joke in the movie pays it off. The artist performing at the festival is Macy Gray, an R&B and neo-soul singer. We all know who this man is, right? When Peter runs and opens his shirt to reveal the suit underneath, it's a homage to how Christopher Reeve did it in the Superman films. In this shot, we can see small holes in the suit's wrists where the webbing is meant to come out.
Spine.
In Norman's mansion, we can see several tribal masks used as decoration, which may have served as inspiration for the Green Goblin's mask. Willem Dafoe revealed that when he played the Green Goblin's persona, he used his real, slightly uneven teeth. But when he portrayed Norman, he wore prosthetics to make them look straighter and more polished. Here we can see the ironic joke the Daily Bugle makes about the earlier mention of the bug infestation, implying that Spider-Man is part of the plague that needs to be eradicated. More flowers. On Peter's desk, we can see the Daily Bugle issue offering rewards for photos of Spider-Man. This scene is taken from Spectacular Spider-Man magazine number 2. We can also see that, both in the comic and in the film, Norman is dressed in Spider-Man's colors while Peter wears the Green Goblin's. In the movie, Harry, caught between both characters, ends up wearing a mix of their colors. Even more flowers. In this scene, we can see a second Green Goblin in the background, a production mistake that was accidentally left in. However, many fans interpreted it as a subtle hint at Harry eventually following in his father's footsteps. The scene where the Green Goblin throws MJ from the bridge is a homage to the Amazing Spider-Man number 121, where he does the same to Gwen Stacy, an event that ultimately leads to her death. The moment where the Green Goblin grabs Spider-Man with a cable is taken directly from the Amazing Spider-Man number 28. When the Green Goblin rips through the web, you can hear a metallic sound, emphasizing how strong and resistant Spider-Man's webbing is, almost like steel. Norman's death scene is almost identical to how it happens in the Amazing Spider-Man number 122.